So the my basic training barracks were designed to sleep 8 people
Okay.
because they were trying to get more people through basic training. They doubled up our barracks.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having 8 people in my dorm, we had 12 people,
Okay.
and they had to bring foot lockers in for the other.
What did you have in your barracks? Did you have like microwaves,
No,
stoves,
no.
just
We had
bunkers?
we had just sleeping bays, an open shower.
Okay.
There were washing machines in the bathrooms. I'd forgotten about that because that's how you did your laundry. Either could do your laundry there or you could send your laundry off to be done.
Okay.
And I was doing my laundry, but eventually, and I actually ironed. I remember I was one of the only person that could iron really well. So everybody gave me their uniform to iron. So somebody would wash my clothes, and I would iron all the clothes in return.
Did they check what you wore?
Yes,
Like what did you have to wear?
you had to wear what's called a BDU, which is the combat boots, the military pants, a brown undershirt, and an overshirt, a field jacket they would call it,
Okay.
and then you have to wear a cap.
Mm-hmm.
And all back when I was in, everything was woodland field camo, because again we thought we were going to fight a war. We're going to be fighting against the Russians, and we had camouflage that would work on a German
Gotcha.
forest.
And what do they check? I know like checkups are very strict. Like the stripes you have on your badge have to be a certain
Yeah,
way or
everything had to
whatever.
be straight and it had to be squared away. They really weren't that. They were strict, but not that strict. And
Okay.
we only had to wear our what we called Class A's, our dress uniforms, once a
Once a
month
month. Okay.
when you got paid.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That's right. When you got
Yeah.
paid, you had to wear your Class A's. And back then, they still handed us checks during basic training. They would hand you a check when you got your regular company. You had to have you had to have a checking account. They did direct deposit.
Okay.
But when we were basic training, you got paid, and everyone when you got paid, everyone had to march down to the Fort Knox Federal Bank to catch their checks.
Okay.
So that's kind of the gist of basic training.
Okay. So
Basic training was a lot of times you were just tired all the time.
fast forward back to Saudi Arabia.
So Saudi Arabia, our tanks finally arrived. I think we were in country for 2 weeks when they finally arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Once they arrived, and I got my tank assignment, I was attached to the HQ of my combat team,
Mm-hmm.
and from there we took our tanks and all of our equipment and drove north. And we drove north to the rocky desert area, and we had to use our GPSs to figure out exactly where we were. And when we got there, the tent city was already set up because we had a French army who was also bivouacked with us.
Okay.
And when you got to the tent city, it was it was a lot rougher because there were big tents that were set up and small tents, and the big tents were for the officers and the non-commissioned officers, all the higher ranked people. All the low ranked people got small tents.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was part of a HQ company, got an okay tent. I actually had a tent with we had a tent that would sleep 6 people, but we only had 3 people in
What
it.
dictates a bad, a medium, and a good tent?
It's just it's hard to explain what they are. It's a tent, and some tents come in 3 sizes. There's a small tent which is big enough to put 2 cots in it and your equipment. Then you have the medium-sized tent, which is the one I was in. That's designed for 6 people, but we only had 3 people in it, and we had other equipment, our equipment plus some of the company's equipment, like
Okay.
the stoves, the generators were there with us, and food was in there as well.
Okay.
Then you had the larger tents that were designed for the non-commissioned officers and the officers. Those tents were huge. They would easily sleep 20 people, But they would they would only have a few people. They would have desks set up for them, computers, televisions, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the shower would probably be the worst thing about it, but it was probably also the funniest thing. You had they set up the shower so that you had these walls that came up to about your almost to you would just see the upper part of your shoulders out of it. Where I was stationed at, we had women as well, so women and men had to use the same shower areas.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all had individual showers with a shower head that sprayed out lukewarm water. It was just it was the temperature of the day is the water you got, and you had to stand on top of a wooden pallet.
Okay.
In the middle of the shower, they dug a trench, so that as everyone showered above you, the water would go into this trench and would float down to this giant pool at the very end of the compound, where the water would just sit and eventually evaporate.
Okay.
And you would be taking a shower and you'd see stuff floating by you like hairbrushes, toothbrushes, clothes.
Wait, did you have like a designated shower time, or did you just go whenever?
You just go in every time.
And like, what was your day like? How did you keep up with training? Did you have?
So you did a lot of the same drills. Get up, get out, get in your tank, get your gas masks on, get the tanks started, charged up and started. Drive a tank to a certain distance. And they would all hours of the day they would tell you incoming gas attacks. Okay. And you'd have to do all these drills. They had a problem too that we had gas detectors, but they wouldn't function properly a lot of times. So people brought chickens with them. Because we found out that someone had said that if the chickens are really susceptible to gas attacks, because that was one of the big fears because this Iraqi army was famous for having gas weapons, and with the gas detectors not really working that well, they were more afraid that we would get gas and not know about it. But with chickens die really quickly from any sort of gas agent.
Okay.
So everyone had cages of chickens all over the place. And some of them were running loose as well.
So the chickens were somehow used to
detect gas. So if you saw dead chickens, you knew that you were under a gas
Oh,
attack.
so they weren't used to detect gas. You just knew if they were dead, that the gas had been
you had a gas attack, right?
Okay. So when did you eat?
When did we eat?
Yeah, and what did you eat?
Chow line was you ate 3 meals a day.
When
they
you
were
wake
all
up.
hot. When you woke up, you ate breakfast. Then you did like a morning PT after you ate. And then you go back to your tent, or you go to your tank, depending on what was on the training cycle that day. There was tons of boredom. We had, people had television so you could watch.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what's entertainment like?
Yeah. And you had there was always someone always had movies playing all the time. There was always someone had a VCR. You know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, we had those, and there was always movies playing all the time. You could sit down and watch a movie.
Did you get like, what do you call it? Like movies coming out and stuff?
No, it was just movies that were on VHS that someone had sent to them.
And what about news? How do you keep up with that?
You got newspapers. You got the
newspapers.
Army Times.
Did you read it?
Yeah, you read it.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I read the Army Times.
What kind of things were on the newspapers?
It had like a lot of like news stories that was also geared to a lot of things that were going on in the military itself.
Oh, that's because I didn't know if you just got like the New York Tribune or something, or if you got like
you can get the New York Times
like
things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in Saudi Arabia. You drove up north after your tanks got there 2 weeks later.
So you sit around and you're a lot of bored.
You're in OT
So
10.
we keep hearing that Iraq isn't backing down. They aren't leaving Kuwait.
Wait, so what's the conflict at the time?
So what happened is that Iraq had invaded Kuwait because they had accused Kuwait of stealing oil from them, and Kuwait actually did.
But what's the U.S.'s involvement? Is it just allies, or is there something?
Yeah, as an ally to Saudi Arabia, because the fear was that that Saddam Hussein would run through Kuwait and then would keep on going south into Saudi Arabia and seizing all the oil fields that are south of it. And if he seized those things, and also at the time, Saudi Arabia had like the third largest army in the world.
Okay.
So I don't know how. I don't remember it being all that terribly large, but anyway, so it was like the third largest army in the world. They had just had a long war with Iran, and it basically ended in a stalemate, with neither side being able to.
So, all right. So, you're in Saudi Arabia. You have chicken. You have whatever, and then you hear that Iraq is not backing down from Kuwait because they accused them of taking their oil.
Stealing the oil, right? And Kuwait was a very rich country, much richer than Iraq in general. Although Iraq was not too bad.
Okay.
So, so the bombing campaign begins to started up, and every day you just see these planes flying overhead as they bomb targets in Iraq, and you can see far out in the desert, you can see these plumes just going up as bombs are hitting stuff.
Okay.
And I think there was still a belief, I think, at that time that we wouldn't actually invade Iraq. That because we were on the Iraqi-Saudi Arabian border. We weren't bordered with Kuwait, where my station was.
Okay.
So we didn't think that we would be invading Iraq. We just didn't think that was going to happen. We thought that eventually the bombing was going to take its toll on them, and they would end up backing down. And then it didn't happen. So the Iraqis had what they called their elite unit called the Republican Guards, and those were the guys who were in Kuwait.
Okay.
They were the ones who did most of the fighting and were the best trained of all the Iraqi military.
Mm-hmm.
When we finally got what our orders were supposed to be, and again, because I was still a part of the Yccjcuc company, I kind of got to sit in on a lot of these meetings.
Yeah.
Of the strategizing what was going to happen. So what determined what our strategy was going to be is that we were supposed to, as a unit, go through. If we were to invade Iraq, we were going to go into Iraq. We were going to go north and then make a right-hand turn at a certain point in the desert.
Okay.
And then go straight to the Tigris and Euphrates River, in order to attempt to cut off the retreat of the Republican Guard. And if we made a contact with anybody, we were supposed to destroy them, to eliminate them as a threat. We knew that in front of us were a lot of older, less skilled, poorly equipped, poorly trained, poorly fed soldiers. So one of the things they gave us was a card that kind of told us how to pronounce things in Arabic, telling them to surrender, and then they'll be taken care of.
Would they be taken care of?
Yeah, they would. We were going to take prisoners of war.
But how did you treat those? I mean, did you know?
Huh?
Do you know how prisoners of war work?
Yeah, we did. That's a lot of the training also was all that Geneva Conventions on understanding.
Was it like back in the day where they abused them, or how did?
No, we don't abuse us prisoners.
I'm
What
sorry.
are you talking about?
What?
Why don't you shut your pie hole and let me finish?
Okay.
Abuse the prisoners. Good grief. Not the Soviet army.
How did they abuse prisoners? Sorry.
So anyway, we got these cards that were they were supposed to drop leaflets on them as well, telling them that as soon as the Americans show up, surrender. Don't shoot. If you shoot, you're going to die. And as we rolled, at the time they were going to do the invasion, we started the invasion in December. It was
December of what?
I don't know, 90 something. I remember it was cold and it was rainy and it was a miserable.
Do you remember your age at the time?
I was 19, 20.
What was that for someone like a 20-year-old?
It was kind of you're kind of excited because you've been bored out of your mind all this time. So it was kind of exciting, but also sort of kind of daunting and scary.
I mean, did your maturity go up?
Did you shut up? Good grief. So you didn't, we'd always been trained and told no one can match us with our weapon. If we're inside of a tank, we're going to be well protected. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. Is you roll out, you start this invasion, you have all these artillery shooting over your heads, and you see them hitting targets way out in the desert, and you start taking off, going after them. And the tanks were really, really fast. I mean, they were doing 35, 40 miles an hour. And eventually you start making contact with the enemy. And some of them are starting to shoot at you.
How safe are you in the tanks?
Very safe. There was nothing to penetrate the armor. Yeah. They had some really old, I wish I could find my picture of me on top of an old T-55 Soviet era tank that we had captured. And, because one of the other things is we ended up discovering is that we were moving so much faster than the fuel could keep up with it. The trucks couldn't keep up with the speed that the tanks could keep up with, and they had a couple of other problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point we were less than a week into the war, and we were far, far ahead of our point that we were supposed to be.
Wait, was there any things you did during that first week?
Yeah, we drove a tank.
What, like you did?
We found people. Like, what did I do?
Yeah, like you were a shooter, right?
Yeah, I was the gunner.
Did you kill anyone? How does
You shot tanks. You don't. Sometimes you imagine that were people getting killed. But I remember there was a tank trying to escape, and I remember shooting it. And all I could see is when I shot it, all you could see was the top of the tank blowing up and up off the thing on a jet of fire underneath of it.
Wait, I have a curiosity because my teacher in middle school, his son drove a tank, and he said that when you train, you had a simulation type of thing, and but it was so realistic that in real life it looked the same.
It looks the same, yeah.
So you didn't really have an emotional effect from shooting.
Yeah, you're not supposed to, but you still do, because it's the difference between a computer and an actual thing happening.
Yeah. Okay.
So
keep going.
So we were driving, and like I said, a lot of times you could hear people shooting. People were shooting at you, and you could hear. It sounded like something like popcorn popping. All the time.
On your tank?
Yeah, on the tank, on the side of the tank. And we would race across everybody. And eventually, because we had also a bunch of infantry guys, infantry would get out there and start rounding it up. And a lot of times it would be shooting at us for just a couple of minutes because we were the tip of the spear, and we cut through everything, and destroyed a lot of their armored units if they had any around, because their armored units couldn't move and shoot. They had to sit still and shoot, so they became very easy targets. And even if they tried to escape, they couldn't. They were very slow compared to ours, so we could catch up with them really, really easily. So when we first came through and made the contact with them, we could hear them shooting at us. Cool. And then we would sometimes return fire. A lot of times we would use a lot of machine guns on them, but a lot of times they would quickly stop shooting, and then the rest of the infantry would arrive, and they would start processing them as prisoners of war. And then we would at that point look at the equipment they had, and we captured so many tanks, we captured so many guns, just a bunch of machines, so to the point where we had to destroy a bunch of them because you couldn't just leave them behind. And we would sometimes, we would take the AK-47s and we would shoot them at full automatic running all these bullets till you started seeing the barrel starting to turn red from being shot so much. And then eventually you hear, "Boop," and it would bend a little bit and destroy and ruin the gun.
Okay, so
So
you one weekend.
yeah, so we were about a week. We were a weekend. And we were really far ahead of where we should be, but we had to wait for the fuel to show up.
Where should you have been?
I don't remember, Tommy. It's
Mm.
it's a desert. Okay, there's not like a signpost that says "Welcome to." You know, we knew there were these little villages on the way in, and at one village we were supposed to then take the right turn and go straight to the river. Well, by the time we got to the river, the Republican Guard had already left. They had actually. It turns out the Republican Guard had already left Kuwait well before we had gotten there. Before the invasion had started.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like well before the invasion had started. So we caught just the tail end of a couple of them, and that's when we had a little bit of a I guess a firefight would be the way to say it. We actually people fought back at that point instead of just simply surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
But once that happened and we cut off the river, and we know the Republican Guard had gotten back, then the war in essence starts to wind down. Kuwait had been largely liberated. This was 3-4 weeks. There were still some firing, and the Iraqis eventually surrendered,
Mm-hmm.
and we stopped shooting everybody. But it was, it was a lot of, like I said, the first part of the war was very boring. It was just days upon days of not really doing anything. You'd have some drills, you would have some maneuvering start. We'd have to, get the tanks in and out. It's things that were supposed to prepare us for going.
And
to
that
war.
was prior to invading Kuwait.
That was Iraq.
Iraq, yeah.
The guys to the south who invaded Kuwait actually had found more people, more resistance, but I wasn't involved with that.
So the war lasted a month?
It's a couple of weeks, yeah.
And that was like the entire war. It just settled.
For me, it was, yeah. And then when everything got done, we were there. We processed a lot of prisoners. A lot of prisoners to process.
How do you process a prisoner?
So it's a pain in the butt. You have to get them. A lot of them don't speak English. Some actually, there were a lot of them, but a lot. There were quite a few that could speak English. So we finally ones that could speak English. We asked them to translate. We had to process it. Let's find out who they were, whether they were officers or enlisted, separating the officers from the enlisted people, then feed them. All of them were starving, basically. And that was the other thing that slowed us down was the number of prisoners that we got.
But how long do they stay as prisoners?
Until the end of the conflict.
Oh. Which I imagine wasn't that terribly long. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it was it. And as far as we knew, that once the war ended, they all went to go back. They went back home.
All right. So you process prisoners. Anything else of interest?
Not really.
What did you do after all that?
That's what
in
I got
the army.
hurt.
How did you get hurt?
I got jumped off the top of a tank and messed up my knee so bad I couldn't start to bend it back out again.
When was that?
That was right at the end.
Of the conflict or just at your
right
time?
At the end of the conflict.
Nice.
And because we were winding down, the war had ended, the buildup was not necessary anymore. I got a medical discharge.
So were you in a battlefield or were you just like
No, I was
drilling?
No, I was trying to go and eat. We were just sitting around.
Nice. And you busted your knee.
Messed up my right knee.
Nice. So medical lease. Were you still in Saudi Arabia at the time?
Yeah, I was still in Saudi Arabia. We were moving tanks back to the train railhead.
How much were you making in Saudi Arabia? I forgot to ask. Same amount?
Oh, good grief! No, I was making I think $1,200
a month. Mm-hmm. And then you got hurt.
Yeah.
So you were on a 3-year commit. How long did you stay?
Not even a year.
Not even a year. All this
About
happened?
a year, yeah. Right at a year.
Huh. And then
I had paid all of my money into the GI Bill. The GI Bill worked that you had to pay $1,000 in, $100 in every month. I had already made my $1,200,
mm-hmm.
and because I got discharged without finishing my enlistment, I lost that money and I didn't get the college fund. But I did a couple of years later find out that I could have qualified for some part of it.
Huh. So when you got hurt and got sent back, where did you come? Did you come to Knoxville?
Yeah, I got processed out in Knoxville.
And what did you do in Kentucky afterwards?
Nothing. Came home.
All right.
What did I do? I came home.
Nice. Okay.